Welcome back. On the 19th of December, the Finance Minister, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, presented the budget to the National Assembly. And we were told that in 2014, we would be, the total sum of the budget was 4.6 trillion. Well, it's a little bit less than the budget for 2013, and she also went ahead to tell us that the focus was on job creation and inclusive growth. What does all that mean to the common man on the street? And sometime in the course of this discussion, we're also going to look at the implementation of the 2013 budget. How did we do with that? And how are we hoping to do in 2014? To look at these issues and many more with us this morning, it's my pleasure to welcome a policy analyst, Mr. Galtima Lehman.
Good morning. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. We are also expecting the editor-in-chief of the Financial Standard, Mr. Bola Ononoga. He will be joining us in the course of the discussion. Mr. Lehman, let me just ask you, what were your thoughts when you heard the few details that we have about the 2014 budget?
Well, I'm not given to a lot of euphoria when it comes to the annual budget of the Nigerian nation, because...
That's not very encouraging.
It's not very encouraging because fundamentally the budget doesn't define the course of the development for you. It's just a snapshot of what you have for a long-term strategic development of the nation, 5 years, 10 years, depending on the time frame that you've given to it. So the budget is just what you expect to do within 1 year. Now, if your strategic development plan does not give you those dividends of democracy that you are expecting because of certain lapses in the total aggregate economy in terms of what you expect as income, then the budget that is going to cascade down, trickle down from it, will be so insignificant that you wouldn't see the kind of changes that you are expecting to see from the political space. And that's precisely why I said I'm not really excited when it comes to the annual budget, because the real aggregate issues have not been tackled. You were just talking about earlier on about the power sector difficulties, the petroleum industry bill, and so many other things that ought to be in place. So when you look at the budget, an annual budget, you like to ask yourself, that annual budget is trickling from what strategy? The overall picture is not robust enough to tackle the humongous problems facing the country in terms of infrastructure, in terms of utilities, in terms of investments, in terms of the power sector. Then the budget can do absolutely nothing.
Over the years, there have always been complaints about the recurrent being too much over the capital, which portends the fact that we're not looking at development. We're only looking to pay
salaries and wages. And that's what I'm saying. And if you look at the 2014 budget that has been presented, 70% of it goes into recurrent expenditure in terms of paying salaries and wages, like you rightly said, and about 30% thereafter, or less, is going into capital projects and all that. But the totality of the budget, as I told you earlier on, is the aggregate economy. A study was done during Obasanjo's administration when he was talking about the National Economic Empowerment Development Strategy, the NEEDS document. And for the kind of deficit that you have had for about 30 years, it was found out that Nigeria, on the average, on aggregate, required something close to about $100 billion annually for a sustainable period of time for it to begin to address some of these humongous problems. You understand? And so if any other shortfall from that magnitude of that kind of fund will still not address those key issues that you want to see. So first and foremost, the most important thing in a budget is, what is a budget actually? The most important thing is the aggregate economy. What kind of income are we expecting? In a country that is so far dependent 98% to the tune of 98% on just one product, that's the oil and gas product. And that oil and gas product is not contributing in the optimal manner that it ought to contribute, because we are exporting it in a primary form. And in addition to that, there are a lot of leakages in terms of the vandalization, in terms of piracy, in terms of the stealing, in terms of the corruption that is taking place in that. So, A, you're not adding value to the major source of income. Look at the contribution from the other sector, the non-oil export. Just, you know, ridiculous $2.8 billion US for an economy the size of Nigeria.
But it is improving.
What is improving there? What can it do? It ought to do a lot more than that.
Little, it is improving.
That's what I'm saying. It ought to do a lot more than that for you to see the kind of significant changes that you're expecting to see in the Nigerian nation. You know, it's just like your house. Now your budget, you're expecting an annual budget in your own compound, you know, on a micro level, something close to about 250,000 naira for you to run your home, send the children to school and all that. And your income is 50,000 naira. You understand? So there is a huge deficit. And there's no way you can handle that before you, at the end of the day, you start seeing your children sent out of school and things like that. You can't pay your electricity bill. So the first thing you have to do is to see how we can raise that 50,000 naira on a micro level to the 250 or to the 300,000 so that you can begin to address some of these expenditure deficits that we're having. So in effect, the major problem we're facing in Nigeria is not about what budget you have in 2013, what budget you have in 2014, but on the aggregate level, the kind of size of the economy vis-a-vis the income coming into the nation. You're not exporting, you're not adding value, you are consuming the little that you have, you are importing very expensive petroleum products, you are subsidizing that. You are also spending about 70% of your income on conspicuous consumption and salaries, and most of the income that is being made from those salaries are being spent on products that are imports. So basically, what do you have for development? That's the question.
Okay. We've since been joined by the editor-in-chief of the Financial Standard, Mr. Bola Ononuga. A happy new year to you.
Same
welcome.
to you at this end.
Welcome. Now, there's a point which he raised, which I want to take up with you. I remember in the days of Ibrahim Babangida, there was that slogan, export to survival, export and survive, or something. You remember what I'm talking about? From then to now, because he was talking, we don't export anything. I know we export a few things. Has there been any improvement in that area? And how much money is that bringing into the country?
Basically, from the time of 5BB, because he's no more Ibrahim Babangida. While he was in government, it was Ibrahim Babangida. Now he's known as IBB. That is what everybody knows him to be. Now, every society, whether small or big, they move forward. They don't move backward. So I will agree with him. It might be a very little improvement, but there's been a lot of improvement in the Nigerian economy. In Babangida's time, we were talking about banking privatization and all sorts of things. In actual fact, even channels was a product of IBB's time. And after that, there have been so many other media houses that span TV houses that came up thereafter. It's an improvement in the economy because there have been employment that they are generating. There have been contribution in terms of criticism and information and education on the economy. So all these, they are working. In terms of the economy, things have moved forward. We've had more chambers of commerce.
Export.
Yes, we've had more chambers of commerce, which are the engineers of export in the country, because you can't have a chamber of commerce where you only import. So if you are not exporting, there will not be a chamber of commerce, because the chambers of commerce is an assembly of both foreign nationals and local people that are both exchanging ideas and information and import and export. So there has been improvement, and greatly, and the economy has expanded more. The size of the budget in the times of IBB has become much larger today than we used to find it. Though in the time of IBB is purely a military oligarchy that you cannot claim that this is the exact thing that were being done. But today, because of democracy, National Assembly must pass a budget. This must come into being. Every interest group must be taken care of. So things are improving, and the economy has become larger. And because population is increasing as well, so you have to make provision for many more other people. And they now do election, and the election you do here in Nigeria, the election we do any part of the world, every election comes with a larger size of budget in itself. So the Nigerian, I wouldn't know how it will be spent, because we are a special human being in this country.
Peculiar people.
We are peculiar people.
Yes. Let me ask Mr. Gatima Lima. Now, when we say that this budget, it's projected to have about 3.7 trillion to cover recurrent expenditure and just about 1.1 on capital, it seems to have decreased in terms of capital expenditure. What's your thought about that?
Well, like you rightly mentioned, it's an election year, you know, and democracy, particularly the bicameral type with the two legislative chamber, the presidential system is quite an expensive one. And when it comes to a year before the election, you see a lot of logistics, a lot of movements and all that. So if you look at some of the components of the budget, you're talking about the president buying another aircraft. You're talking about expenditure for a lot of local trips and all that kind of a thing. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on the recurrent, basically, you know, on overheads and things like that. And that invariably contradicts what the Honorable Minister was saying, that it shows that this particular budget was going to create jobs and all that. So if you're spending a lot more on recurrent expenditure, how else are you going to then have, in a zero-sum manner, how else are you going to have the extra funds that you need for providing the alternative in terms of, development in the manufacturing sector and all that kind of thing? And back to his question, back to the question they asked him about exports. I'll beg to disagree with him that the export is being improved simply because there are chambers of commerce and all that kind of a thing. The reality is that quantitatively you need to have numbers. And the number that we have right now is 2.8 billion US dollars for an economy while the oil and gas sector is contributing about something close to about 30 billion US dollars per annum. So look at the parity. You know, it's not good. You know, it simply says that the Nigerian economy is just relying on one product, which is oil and gas, which is quite dangerous, and is relying without adding value. If we are talking about even the field that I come from, which is the maritime sector, for instance, over 99% of the oil export is being still done by foreign interest, foreign shipping companies. So there is a lot of intangible services that cost a lot of funds, you know, to the federal government in terms of foreign exchange that is being lost there.
Well, let me take you back to what you said earlier, because the question I was asking is, we seem to be spending more and more and more on recurrent. Are you putting it down strictly to because we are in the election
Not necessarily.
preparatory
Not necessarily. You see, there's been a lot of argument at the political level that this system that we're running, the presidential system that we're running, invariably is quite expensive, because you'll have senators who have their special assistants, their personal assistants. You have the House of Rep members, and then you have ministers of states and all that. You know, so the executive arm is quite expensive for you to run. The legislative arm is quite expensive for you to run. And for a country this, you know, fragile in terms of its economy, like what we have seen in Senegal, they've said, look, we can't continue this burden. So they scrapped, I think, the Senate, so that they can only have a unicameral system in place, either the state assembly, so that the huge chunk of that money that you are talking about is not even going to go to the 10 million or so workers that are estimated to receive salaries and wages. It's a substantial proportion of that amount of money